engaged, and they don't seem to see it. Um, and that's part and parcel of their kind of their nihilist way of looking at the world. There is no objective truth to them, and their worldview accommodates alternative facts, which are of course BS. Alternative facts are nothing but a code word for a lie that's a warm blanket that makes a moron feel better. Um, but to the gentleman's name that was talking about the what's colloquially called the brain drain that's occurred in Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, and it's just accelerated, frankly, in the 21st century now, and especially in the last 10-15 years. They don't really have a future. Not only is their population decreasing, but their population of people that are capable of being productive in a increasingly high tech world is decreasing. And I don't mean hackers. I mean people that are going to start up your next digital services company and things like that. Something Estonia, frankly, has become quite famous for. Ukraine as well before the war, and that's that's exactly the type of professional that if they had any money right after the war started, they hightailed it the hell out of Russia to any country they could slither into. And this isn't recent; it's just accelerated. And it's specifically because of this that like these guys really don't have a whole hell of a lot of a future. And this is part of the reason why it's a country of 130 some odd million that's got a GDP smaller than quite a few US states. Um, they're really underdeveloped in the grand scheme of what is, I don't consider them a first world country. I do consider them a developing third world nation. And I don't even know that they're developing, they're kind of regressing right now. And I suspect over the next 20 years, I'm going to watch that regression go into turbocharged overdrive. And back over to you, Slavi.
Yeah, I think the most effective way would be after the war would that's just my opinion would be complete isolation for them because if there are if they will be allowed to come into the West, it's not gonna go over so well with anybody. So I think isolation for at least 10 to 20 years would be the most effective. I don't care if anybody thinks that's cold, but it's the right thing to do. It's just, they're going to be dangerous, very dangerous, and we're seeing it right now. And especially, they're going to be a great threat to Ukrainians as well as other citizens. Um, we're already seeing, murders. There was a murder of a Ukrainian very young boy, Ukrainian basketball player in Germany, so that there's going to be more incidents like that. So complete isolation for uh, for Russians for sure. It's not like they don't have enough room. Like, let's be honest here. Let's go over to Kiki.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to just support the comment that fellow made a little while ago. Gave three options as to why, why these kind of people who are facilitating groups, why it would happen. I think it's just ignorance of other cultures and what happens in the rest of the world, and looking at it from a North American perspective. I'm a retired Canadian teacher, and our philosophy, like I'm sure in America, is that we're all the same, we're all equal, we all are in the same classroom, we should all get along, and so on. And yes, we should teach that philosophy and so on, but we also need to be aware that people come from other cultures and other world situations, and they have other experiences. And just because we might want to say, okay, now we're all, we're going to get along and live together, um, we have to take a look at what, especially kids, but adults' experiences have been as well. You can't put, for example, two Muslim kids, necessarily expect that they're going to be friends if they're Sunni and Shia, for example. And I'm not saying that everybody has to fight, but I mean, we just think, okay, Muslim, they're all the same, and they're not. But speaking more specifically with Russian and Ukrainian, I remember at the beginning of the war, the attack, there was a shelter. Um, in Estonia. My background is Estonian. I'm Estonian too, and they had put refugees, Ukrainian refugees, together in the same shelter with Russian refugees. They were looked at refugees because they ran once they left Russia when they were still able to, and put them together in the shelter. And the Ukrainian people were just traumatized. They had just escaped. Now they were, in the same building with Russians. Just to be aware of things like that. I spoke with a colleague about in Canada, having when we have had many Russian families come, and there was one situation where there was a Russian. Sorry, we had very many Ukraine. I'm not forgot what I said. The Ukrainian families have come, and there was a Russian teacher, well, Canadian, but still Russian origin, who was more very much pro Russia in her stance. And I just spoke with a colleague, a principal, that, like, just be careful when you're putting students into this kind of situation. Just because it's a Canadian teacher, they could be traumatized with some things that are maybe philosophies or the way of approaching kids or whatever. Just because we're from the same background, and I'm saying, North American, and that's very varied also. We can't assume that everyone thinks the same. And then there's personalities. Just because we're from the same town doesn't mean we all think the same. So um, I guess my point was that in North America, Canada, we expect people to be, um, uh, you know, to be accepting. And for a long time, when I was younger too, I was really surprised when I heard about tensions between various culture groups. And I just thought, well, very naively, like, why are these people fighting? We're in Canada. We're supposed to all get along. Like, we're all equal here. But I didn't think about that they come from their own countries and cultures and backgrounds and histories, and they have histories between other cultures and countries, and those same um, problems or histories are brought here, and they're continued in Canada and the States. So just to be aware of that every situation is different. If we're in a situation where we can supervise someone or facilitate, whether it's camps or schools or churches or anything like that. Thank you. I'll go back to listening.
Thank you, Kiki. And yeah, I think as a former teacher, this is something you probably appreciate and you know the truth of quite well, especially if are very familiar with early 20th century North American immigration. And I'm just going to leave it open to North American immigration because, by my understanding, both north and south of the border, the patterns were approximately the same. You didn't see the Irish coming over to the U.S. and even before that in the 18th century, you didn't see the Irish coming over into the U.S. and settling in the areas where there were a ton of English settlers. They tended to get as far away from them as humanly possible, and that persisted into the early 20th century. And it's the reason why certain parts of the U.S., especially, you will see a much larger than in other parts of the country concentration of Catholic churches. Um, and that's just because that's where a lot of the Irish immigrants ended up settling, and I'm in one of those parts of the country. So this isn't exactly a new thing, and I personally think most of this is just ignorance, combined with people that want to virtue signal and act like they're doing something, but they don't really actually understand a damn thing about the underlying conflict. Um, and those folks, while their attempted contributions, I guess, are sometimes appreciated. Um, they Before anyone does that type of thing, they really should at least attempt to educate themselves somewhat. Um, and it wouldn't take a whole lot of reading to prevent those types of idiocies from going on. Back over to you, Slavi. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I wanted to say as well, the pro-Russians that are here in the West, especially that are Russians that choose to be pro-Russia. I mean, we understand the Russians in Russia, there's no freedom. The information that they get is censored, but the ones that come to the West and they're still pro-Russia, they're still pro-genocide. Those Russians or people who choose to be pro-Russia are very, very dangerous because they have access to all the information and they choose to be pro-genocide. So yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to add. I'm very, I guess, concerned about that kind of behavior as well.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's necessarily a way with these event planners to stop it, because there's a certain personality type that tends to get drawn to that world, and usually they weren't burdened with an overabundance of education, specifically with regards to history. So they're tend to be more of the people pleaser, social butterfly type. And being well educated in history and that are not mutually exclusive, but far too often they are, in practice anyway. But moving on to
Just really quick, by the way, about the Miss Europe 2024. It was Russia that won. Um, that's being reported. So that's that's very concerning. That it's Europe. First of all, it's not. I don't understand why Russia is even competing in there. But yeah, and on top of that, it won. So yeah. Uh, go. Sorry, Bella. Go ahead.
well, that's funny if it's Miss Europe, because they like to pretend that they're not European except when it suits them. Um, mm, God, I the Olympics might need to add a mental gymnastics category, and I think Russians and American tankies would have some pretty interesting competitions there. But hypocrisy, it does know no bounds in that country of Absurdistan. Speaking of Absurdistan, and I believe this number is now +1 to 14 is the number of the counting. Um, the 11 Su-34s, 2 Su-35s, and an A-50 AWACS in the last 14 days. Um, I think that is a pace of shoot downs not equaled since the first 2 weeks of this war in late February, early March, or rather the first 2 weeks of the most recent flare up of this war, then in late winter of 2022. Um, I and I have so many questions about how these things are getting shot down, and we're getting visual confirmation on a decent chunk of them. So for the doubt spreaders out there, these are fairly well documented, and Ukrainian Ministry of Defense vehicle kill claims have always fairly closely tracked what Oryx has been able to document. So I have no logical reason to think that this is any different. And I'm be very interested to see if this is some kind of new anti-air weapon, or the Russians are just getting a lot more reckless, or possibly these are pilots that don't have the needed hours and training, that they're basically just sending out on suicide missions to try to glide bomb the areas where these guys are trying to assault, and usually just getting torn up. Seen some of the videos out from the flanks of Avdiivka, where the Ukrainian forces have pulled back to, with Bradleys just absolutely wrecking entire loaded up BTRs full of troops. There's another couple that got schwacked today that are not the same as the videos we saw yesterday and the day before. So I don't know if you've heard anything, or if you have any thoughts on the increase in shoot downs. It's been very, very, very significant. You think this is some kind of new weapon system, or do you think this is the Russians just being reckless, or some combination of?
Fala Kubanks, I was just gonna ask you if you have any theories. Personally, I have my guesses. I do respect that Ukrainian government, they're not saying it for a reason. But I will say that something is being um, helped from outside of Ukraine. There is some help, whether it's a radar system or something like that. That's all what I'm going to say from my guesses and from some of the reports that I've seen. Um, so, yes, it is a new radar system that they're using. Um, but I don't suspect that they're using anything new to shoot it down with. But the radar system is not coming from within Ukraine. That's kind of what I'll say about that. Fellow Kubangs, do you have any kind of theories on that?
And I know exactly what you're talking about. That's the biggest open secret there is. Every time those AWACS are up over the Black Sea, our eyes can see quite far. What I found, and this is what makes me think there might be some new capability that's not necessarily made of new parts, was the A-50 shoot down that we saw. It popped flares before it itself was struck, but one of the missiles honed in on flare, and it looked like just a heat flare. I mean, there could have been chaff in there with it too. It was dark. You probably wouldn't have seen the chaff at night, but that to me suggests that missile was heat seeking. If the first one went after a flare, I'm almost wondering if they might not have rigged up stingers onto drones. I don't know. That's conjecture. I have absolutely nothing to support that, other than what took that A-50 down appeared to be heat seeking. So I could be wrong. That's wild conjecture, but the pace of shoot downs has really increased quite a bit, and maybe it is just friendly eyes in the sky giving them some targeting assistance and painting targets long range. The Russians may screw with our Reaper drones, but they will not dare touch an AWACS, because they know damn well within 30 minutes of them messing with one of our AWACS, they will cease to have an air force. There will be F-22s they cannot see that will be wiping them out with great and brutal efficiency. Back over to you, Slavi, and Monica has her hand up as well.
So, I talked to my dad about this, and this is kind of what Ukrainians in Ukraine are saying, that Ukraine is using very, very old missiles that they've had kind of stockpile of. They just changed the radar in them. And I brought it up to Will yesterday, and he was like, "Yes, that's true." We're not sure if that's what they're using to shoot down the SUs, but the SUs are not as fast as the drones to shoot down, right? They don't fly as fast, so it could be a possibility as well. Um, yeah, but that's what my dad said, and he's like, "Yeah, I used to work on those rockets back in the Soviet Union. They just switched up, I guess. I can't remember what he said, but maybe the radar of how the where they fly to. I think maybe that's what it was switched up. Um, Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. We can go over to Monica.
Well, I just want to add something real quick. No, SUs are substantially faster than drones, but if you're shooting a modified S-200 at it, that's faster than either one of them by a wide margin. So it's really not going to matter. And if hypothetically you put a better radar and maybe an inertial guidance system in the, well, no, just a better radar. This is air to air. You don't need inertial guidance. That's for ground. You put a better radar in them, and you have some friendly eyes in the sky over the Black Sea, kind of towards Romania, at 55,000 feet, painting targets. Yeah, hell yeah, that would work. Um, that would definitely work. And my thoughts are, at this rate, I don't know how much longer they're going to have qualified pilots left. We've seen quite a few instructor obituaries here. We saw some last year, but we've seen some in the last month. And you don't have your teachers fly missions. That's grade A stupid. That prevents force regeneration. So I think they maybe get into the bottom of the barrel pilot wise. And that maybe that is a little bit contributory to why we're seeing more of these things get shot down. Also, is you just have guys in that seat that have absolutely no business being in that seat. I don't know. This is all conjecture. The books written after the war is over and the movies made will be highly enlightening. Monica, you had your hand up and it's disappeared. I think you mic'd up and that probably had gotten rid of your hand.
I think that's what happened. That is what happened. I think the two of you have articulated the most commonly articulated theories. The second of which, I discussed when I called in a few days ago, and that is that rather than some sort of new munition, these recent shootdowns have more to do with changes in radar technology or changes in data information sharing with allies flying over the Black Sea, and those are both very plausible. That's a very plausible reason as to why the increased number of aircraft are being lost by the Russians. But an additional theory, and perhaps it's multiple causes that are contributing to this, is that the Russians are flying more missions, particularly with the Su-34, closer to the line of contact than they had in earlier stages of the war. The Russians have had, and Ukrainians too, have had difficulty providing air support for troops on the ground because one general truth about this war is that the anti-aircraft weapons on both sides, in some ways, are more potent than the air forces, and neither side really wants to take a lot of risks. Ukrainians, in particular, don't have a whole lot of aircraft, and neither side just wants to get their kit shot down. But what has changed tactically for the Russians in the last 2 months is the use of providing air support for ground troops using these glide bombs, which allow them to support the troops without flying right over the point of contact. The catch is they still have to fly somewhat close to the point of contact. I think they have to get within 25 kilometers, which is relatively close, and still create some risk for the pilots. But it may very well be the case that the Russians are getting enough bang out of these glide bombs, getting enough benefit on the ground that they are going to take that risk. Whether that's a correct risk assessment or cost benefit analysis, I don't know, but it's a plausible and rational decision that could be made, and maybe they're going to reconsider it given how many planes they're losing. But I do think the Russians got a lot of bang out of this particular weapon in Avdiivka, and in fact, it may be responsible for the result in Avdiivka more than any other single factor. And that may be what's driving them to fly more missions relatively close to the point of contact, although not right over the point of contact. And that may be a factor that's contributing to the larger number of shootdowns.
Yeah, I think you're right, partly. About half of these shootdowns are fairly close to the line of contact. They're within 40, 50 kilometers, which I think is what I've seen stated for how close the Russians need to get to deploy these glide bombs. I've also seen the 25-kilometer number. Now, as Chuck has pointed out numerous times, and he's right, these glide bombs Russia is using, they're pretty similar to what we call a JDAM. If you got all the parts off wish.com, which is why they're not all that accurate, and why we've seen many, many instances of these things failing to deploy. So the bomber aircraft drops them and the wings don't pop out. And that's how they work. The wings come out like a switchblade. So I think you're right in their head. I think they've gotten quite a bit of mileage out of this. I'm not really sure that they've fully done the math on or are correctly weighting their cost benefit analysis of how many pilots do we want to burn up for how many bombs do we want to drop, because pilots are something that they really don't have tens of thousands of. The best numbers I've been able to pull together pre-war, they don't even have thousands of. They've got high hundreds. And now, having lost well over 300 aircraft. Let me go let's see, defense Ukraine. I'd had that pulled up earlier and I stupidly closed out today's numbers. Let's see the total of aircraft that we're up to. Now, this is all aircraft, mind you, but 346 is the number of the counting. So unknown, exactly how many of those took pilots with them. You can probably assume a fair number did. Your aircraft gets hit by a missile. You may not be in any condition to either bail out or eject. And even if you do, this is Russia. You better hope that parachute works and the person that packed it wasn't hungover or still drunk. Parachute packing is an art form, and just knowing their general level of incompetence is not something I would ever want to use as a parachute that was packed by the Russian military. In general, I would never want to leave a perfectly functional aircraft, but definitely not putting my life in the hands of one of their chutes. That's a hell of a loss rate. 346 aircraft, and how many pilots, and how many of the pilots for specifically like the Su-34s. And this is what I found a little bit interesting, is that they're starting to use Su-34s to do this. And previously they'd been using, I think it was the 24s, the older aircraft. So I'm wondering if they're either out of functional airframes or running low on type-rated pilots that are qualified, and that's why they're bringing out the Su-34s. They're clearly not doing it because they feel more confident and comfortable in operating in Ukraine's airspace. That's contested airspace at best for the Russians. So, and it's clearly not a permissive environment. Every single day they're losing one or two aircraft. We will, I guess, see how much longer they can keep this up. But I do have a feeling that pilots are going to become the limiting factor. Pilots are the absolute most valuable, most important people in any military because they take the longest to make. You can train somebody to drive a tank in days or weeks. I have no idea, but it can't be that complicated compared to flying an airplane. So, where you can train new tank crews in a matter of months, you might be able to get a guy to not turn himself into a smoking hole with an airplane in a month or two, but actually turning them into a competent combat pilot, that's 2 to 4 years. Um, and there's some military guys that can give you far better numbers for that than I can. I'm just a civilian private pilot that I'm not even at 200 hours in a little Cessna. And that's over almost 5 years. So, and I'm not real comfortable, especially when the weather gets bad. So, those guys that fly combat missions, they definitely in the U.S. Air Force have my respect, because I know the absolute thousands and thousands of hours that they've trained to do it. And that's always been something that we've known about Russia, is their hours for competency every year are well less than half of what you see with most NATO countries. And that may be contributing to, like you were saying, they're flying missions closer to the zero line. These guys don't have as much training, and they're just getting popped by NASAMS or Patriot. I'm guessing Patriot most likely, but who knows? Or it's one of these modified S-200s. I think there could be a lot of options there. And back over to you, Slavi.
All right, sorry, I was just looking at the next story to talk about, and I was kind of looking into the details of what's happening with the intercepted call scandal of apparently it was tourist missiles and the Kerch Bridge. I don't know if you heard anything about it. I was just trying just now to kind of get to the bottom of it. So I guess Russians intercepted a call between Germans, and how uh, maybe perhaps there were tourist missiles that were used on the Kerch Bridge previously. This is, I think this is clearly a scandal that was kind of planted by Russians, I believe. So it was presented by a Russian propagandist. Although maybe we now understand why Scholz is actually sweating the Taurus missiles and not giving them to Ukraine. Maybe because he's getting threats from Russia, probably because Russia is really scared of Ukraine getting a hold of those Tauruses, and Ukraine using it on the Kerch Bridge. Uh, what do you think about it, fellow
Yeah,
Bronx?
I've read a little bit about this, and I've read some pretty contradictory stuff. Um, One of the things I've read is that basically the Germans have more or less confirmed this was a actual intercepted communication and not an elaborate fabrication. I'm not, obviously the Russians do not want to see Ukraine get their hands on something like a Taurus. That would be similar in capabilities to the Storm Shadow, but with a little bit longer range and a little bit more boom boom. So they would definitely be capable of taking out that bridge. And who knows if I'm still very skeptical that that phone call is real. Quite honestly, I haven't seen any anything from the few sources I've seen that where the Germans supposedly confirmed it weren't really official. So I would keep a healthy degree of skepticism with that. that this isn't some kind of testing of the waters to see how people react, which is kind of what I think it might be.
I
It,
think Scholz, I'm seeing now Scholz confirmed the authenticity of the audio recordings about the attack on the Crimean Bridge and called it a big problem. Um, yeah, but I'm there with you, fellow Hobongs. If it is in fact a real conversation, uh, then be very worried how the hell Russians got their hands on it, and if in fact they are listening in and recording it.
yeah, that's a question for the German military, who, we're not going to turn this into a rag on Germany segment without Axel. But they this has been kind of done to death with them. There's been a lot of complacency and a lot of rot that they now need to fix, and it's not going to be cheap for them. But freedom isn't free. There is a cost for admission, and unfortunately, these guys have squandered that peace dividend over the years, um, as have, frankly, a lot of other countries. The Germans are by no means alone in that club, and while I'm absolutely furious at what's going on in D.C. with the children we've sent to represent us, I truly hope this serves as and I think it has served as a wake up call to folks in Europe that, look, you guys need to be making some of your own heavy toys as well. And I mean, yes, we absolutely appreciate your arms sales, but unfortunately, we have a giant kindergarten that is encircled by Interstate 395 and 495 here, that contains a lot of overpaid man children and women children that are very good at getting in front of cameras, speaking much, and saying and doing little. Um, and before I launch into a absolute tirade against basically all of Congress, let's go to Drax. You came up to speak, and your hand immediately shot up.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, fellow Hubonks, and good evening, Slava from Western Canada. Yeah, I wanted to come up and talk on that because when you're talking about the fighter jets, and I wanted to bring up something that because I was listening one of the nights, I'm not sure if it was Chuck or Alan or one of the other fellows that were up hosting and that, but there was a discussion on about the fighter jets and with the Russian fighter jets about their ejection seats. And I guess part of the talk was, I guess they really do want to save their pilots, and they do. They were surprised about. They were talking about that their ejection seats might be even higher or even equivalent to the F-16s or uh, uh, ejection seats. That because he was quite surprised because he said that there was footage of one of their planes about ready to crash at very low altitude or something like that, and both guys ejected, and miraculously, the system saved the Russian pilots. So he says, So I just wanted to bring it up that there was a big discussion about it. It might not be about the packing or anything else. They might be having mechanical problems, but he says that apparently Russia does know that how valuable their pilots are, and apparently, I guess their ejection systems are built up there uh, to really try to save their pilots in a way. Um, that but also too on top of that subject net, yeah, I think that there's an idea. I think they're trying to push the front, and I think they're on purposely trying to push more missions in. That's why maybe the planes might be being shot down a little bit more now as part of that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. You know, that there was a great discussion on it and that, and yeah, he surprised a bunch of us, and he was even surprised himself. But yeah, they do apparently want to save their pilots in that, so their ejection systems are a little bit up there, as whatever. He's kind of surprised everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I guess think about it. It makes sense. Pilots are the most valuable, important troops in any military. They take longer to train than anyone else by a huge margin. So, I've never heard of issues with their ejection seats. My thought comes in with specifically like parachute packing with aircraft like say the A-50s. If you were to have to bail out of something like that, aircraft of that body type, I don't think they're going to have ejection seats. They're going to need to do that the decidedly old school way. And that involves strapping a parachute to your back and making it through a stricken aircraft that is likely not exactly flying in a controlled manner out of a door and not getting your head taken off by the fin in the back, by the tail. Um, it's not a simple procedure, and I, I'm not surprised. And I know during prisoner exchanges, the pilots are worth quite a few. Um, Tell Ukraine what to do, but I wouldn't be giving those guys back. I wouldn't be doing that at all. I'd be keeping a hold of them. But yeah, it's all part of their calculus. But if they really are pushing these guys to fly more sorties closer to the zero line, I think this is going to become a non-issue fairly quickly because they're going to get eaten apart. Um, See how that they're not really using their Su-24s that much anymore. Leads me to believe that they may be out of type-rated pilots for those things, and are moved on to the 34s and 35s to fill those roles. Because I remember last year they were using the Su-34s to glide bomb, the Su-24s rather, and that has now become using Su-34s to glide bomb. And the only reason I can imagine for them doing that is airframes or pilots. And I'm with the sheer number of 24s they built, I can't imagine airframes is actually the problem. Even if half of them don't work, they can still cobble together enough working airframes. But type-rated pilots would be so, and that takes quite a while to get somebody type rated on an aircraft and sufficiently competent in it that they can fly a combat mission and not become a smoking hole in the ground. But I definitely encourage them to use non-type rated pilots because we like the smoking holes in the ground when they're Russians. Um, and the amount of cleanup from those things is going to be rather insane, and the amount of UXO that they're going to end up having to deal with because these things are crashing in the middle of nowhere. So you're going to be finding these 500-pound bombs that are undetonated, just sitting in the ground. But it is what it is, and we will see once Ukraine starts fielding some newer aircraft here in the next couple of months. How much worse this gets for the Russians. Because if they're bringing those things within 40, 50 kilometers of the front line, I mean, you can have a 16 fairly far back and pop one of those things with an AMRAAM, and they won't know what hit them. This is something that Saddam found quite impressive briefly. Although the majority of his air force was destroyed on the ground, we didn't let him get off. Same with their air defense system. They kind of just learned to keep their radar turned off. And that's the thing I'm kind of most excited for. Once 16 start operating in country is their integration with the HARM missiles is far more deep. And I'm not saying that it's going to render Russian air defense non-existent overnight, but it's really going to change their calculus because they are not going to want to be leaving those search radars turned on. Because anytime they do that, that search radar is going to cease to exist fairly quickly. And that's been the lesson that everybody that's had to be on the receiving end of F-16s equipped with HARM missiles has learned. Whether it's Bashar al-Assad or Saddam Hussein, nobody equipped with Russian air defense has really found a way to deal with those things, quite frankly. And wasn't it just a couple of months ago there was some booms that happened in Tehran or in Iran with some unknown aircraft flying around. So, yeah, Russian air defense it's nothing to play with, but trained properly, it's pretty clear there's folks out there that know how to operate in that kind of environment and come back home to do it again. Your thoughts on that are Drex, if you have anything else?
No, that was about it. And that, but otherwise, I was enjoying the new topic with Schultz and the bridge and everything, because I was going to want to ask, about that, about the rumor about, you know, uh, with the intelligence and that showing Russian intelligence making their way in and getting such a recording and everything. But it kind of does set something up there, along that form of, it should show to the West that, how far is Russian intelligence getting in if they got something like this, and how integrated or how much, have they infiltrated into every organization, like, especially when they talk about, with uh, Russia had learned about the plans about the counteroffensive, by Ukraine, months ago. And, uh, and the other possibility is like, yeah, the biggest thing is, everyone goes on about, well, they're not sure why is no one, uh, uh, acting on a lot of these things, why aren't they doing the right thing, the moral thing? And it's like, well, maybe the possibility is FSB has moved in, and a lot of these people, we don't know if they're being threatened. It's like, you know what? If you don't do this, or if you agree to this, we know where your family is, or and it's like, we just don't know. And that's the whole hard part about everything is, are some people not doing the right thing because of this? And it's going to take a lot of intelligence agencies of the countries and that to hopefully figure out a lot of this stuff and find out what's really happening. Maybe, like I say, we're not privy to know what's happening. And, you know, that's why some things may be doing secretly without us knowing, and it just looks like garbage to us, but to them it might make sense.
Yeah, that's possible. And I think specifically with regards to Germany, Germany being fairly deeply infiltrated by Russian operatives is not exactly what I would call new news. Nor is it exactly unexpected. You got to remember, at least within my living memory, I remember when there was East Germany and West Germany. So you're still going to have some people that are getting up there in age, Schultz, that are corrupted by that incorrect way of thinking and incorrect mentality that led to, many, many war crimes and barbarisms committed by the Soviets over the years, and quite frankly, substandard results overall. They really, in many ways, never progressed beyond the 1950s. So, I mean, my God, what was that thing? The Trabant. It was a West German car, and I think it was sold in other parts of Eastern Europe. The freaking body panels were made out of what was basically denim and a resin pressed together. Yeah, little two-stroke engine, and 3 on the tree is the most comical. Like, if you gave me the choice of daily driving that or like 1930s Model A Ford, hey, at least the Ford can do 45 miles an hour. That's going to be my first thought. But as far as these politicians that are corrupted, I don't know how much of this is them necessarily being threatened as much as, they might have taken a trip to Russia and, been offered to be put up in a certain hotel. There could be some compromat laying around out there. And I have a feeling, especially with the under 60 crowd, and especially those in journalism, that there's quite a bit of that. And, the best way to find these people out and uncover who they are is going to be just to make sure Ukraine gets what they need to win this war. Because when Russia loses, there's going to be secondary effects inside this country, and a lot of those people that the Russians have dirt on, we're going to end up being able to. Well, let's face it, they're cheap people. You can bribe it out of them, bribe those lists out of them, and we already know Ukraine's been pretty good at getting some targeting info that way, just by, frankly, bribing Russians in the military. And it's worked out thus far. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Slavi, or Drax, if you have a follow up.
No, Slobby can go ahead and that. I'm pretty well at the moment done. You've answered my question and covered what I wanted. I just wanted to bring up about the ejection seats and that because of what I heard from one of the talks.
Bribery works on Russians. That's all what they know is bribery. So that's all I gotta say on that. I've posted a link about the German Defense Ministry, the fact that they confirmed that the Air Force officers' conversations was intercepted. It's in the purple pill. As well, I added a quick little poll. It's in the nest at the top, and it's about should Russians be disqualified from sports competitions as well as any other competitions and any other panels in the West. So, um, should we go to the next story, fellow Hubunks?
Yeah, in a second. Now, okay, this was the same thing I'd seen in Pravda. That means that Germany's already provided Tauruses. That's interesting. So, I mean, yes, it means that there's infiltration by FSB within the German defense apparatus. I'm not going to pretend to be surprised by that, but I think the bigger implication of this is, yeah, indeed, Germany has provided some stuff and they've done it on the down low, which is good. Hopefully Olaf finds his spine and some other things that are around that I don't think he quite knows where they are, even frankly what to do with them if he still had them. But hopefully he's not in office that much longer, and we can get somebody in there that's got a bit of a backbone. Because Germany, I'd seen a post a couple days ago. Over the last year, Germany could have produced hundreds of Leopard 2A7s. And in fact, what have they produced? Double-digit number, very small one. Yeah, they're clearly not actually taking this seriously. I don't judge, and maybe this is because I've been self-employed for 12 years now. I judge people by the results and their actions, not what they say. I don't care what they say. I care what they do and what they deliver. Failing to deliver is okay as long as I can see that you put in a full concerted effort. And I see absolutely none of that out of them. I just see basically dithering and talking. And I don't want to go too much further down this road without somebody like Axel, who is, or Plowman, or one of our Germans who is far more familiar with German politics than I am. But what little I do know is that the German government can make DC seem efficient sometimes, and that's scary to think about. Just with more documentation and better paperwork, is my understanding, but they are substantially slower than even we are. And I think with that, yeah, we can go and move on to the next item there, Slavi.
I do like what Olaf Scholz, I guess, counterpart is doing. Macron, I like to call him these days Macron Napoleon. This is not the story that I want to do, but I'm really liking Macron these days, although I still stand by never trust the French guy. But still, he's still doubling down on on having troops in Ukraine, and he's not backing up. So this is impressive for a French guy. I'm not gonna lie. Do you guys want to comment on that, or should we move on?
Oh, I think it's long since time that a Frenchman attempted to raise Moscow again. Um, yeah, maybe we should get him an overcoat and get him to tuck his hand in there. Although I think he's 3-4 inches taller, and I'm sorry, I don't know what that is in centimeters than Napoleon. Um, but yeah, no, this guy has gone from being Putin's grief counselor on the phone to a little bit of a hawk. And part of me almost wonders if this is some kind of like testing to see what the reaction is from people in the West to this idea. Um, you know, my opinion will surprise nobody. I would love to see the United States Marine Corps chasing these bastards straight down to Kerch. I would love nothing better. Let A-10s make a second highway of tears out of Russian tanks. No mercy. But I don't think I'm in a what I would even call a minority. It would be a very, very large minority, but I think even in the U.S., you would still get probably over 50% of people would support it. And I would be kind of interested to know where that is in Europe. And I think that was the purpose of this statement is to, one, strategic ambiguity, to make Putin start guessing what we're thinking, and two, to test the waters. And I think it's done both at the same time. And no one expected this out of the French. All jokes aside, and Macron has been iffy in the past, but I'm not going to give him any more of a hard time. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Um, I think he got the conversation started, and that was the goal. Um, I don't know. I don't think that he actually means that now, as he said, but the possibility of it for sure kind of planted a seed on getting the conversation started. Because let's be honest, well, it needs to be talked about. At this time, we are already going into the third year of war. Um, and if Ukraine is not getting the ammunition it needs, the artillery that it needs, the defense system that it needs, then this conversation is a very, very timely and needs to happen. And I also think that, I mean, if we put NATO troops on the ground, this war would be over in 3 days. So, yeah, let's go over to you, Jax.
Well, that's a good thing. That is, I don't think he's not just also testing the waters net, but I think the idea he's floating by is to allow the troops in. It'd be easier for training purposes of training of the Ukrainian troops because they wouldn't have to travel as far or spend the money of sending them out of country and to train them. But also, as part of it, I think that he's trying to throw along the hint of using them instead to free up the Ukrainian troops that are on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, and to station the troops all along that border instead, and allow the Ukrainians to pull their troops out and say, hey, no worries, Net. This war is between Ukraine and Russia. Well, let's free up your other borders so you don't have to put all your troops up there. Here, we'll guard your borders. If they come across, that would be their problem. And that, let's free up your troops so you can do proper rotations with your troops in your front, have the proper troops going and doing what they need to do. And, instead of you having to worry about two more borders, like there, like look what's happening with Moldova and that. I'm not going to try to pronounce Transylvania, but that was also the other border that there was a thing that I saw put up saying that, that they can put their troops all along that border there and then allow Ukraine to not worry about these other two places where there could be trouble, and just allow them to concentrate just on Russia alone. And like I say, I think it's a move of testing the waters. I've heard that Canada has thought about doing it as well. They've thought about putting troops over that way in a type of sense. They haven't said exactly how or they would. I don't know where they get the ammunition and everything from that, because our troops are, Canada unfortunately is, they haven't been putting up a lot of money their way in that. But the only, like I say, Canada has their own problems right now with their own liberal and caucus and that. And I mean, the liberals and the conservatives and that, they're having their own problems. And the only thing is Trudeau's doing the right thing because he just does it for publicity. I hate to say it. And, that's the only good thing I'd hate to say about Trudeau, is that's his prerogative in that. But I will press my conservatives in that they had better support Ukraine no matter what, and I will make sure that they will, and to not let off if they get back in power. But like I say, I know Canada is already on the verge of sending troops the same way, but I hope that's what is going to go on. I think that's what he's trying to present to everyone and get everyone's feelings. Let's free up the Ukrainians and let them fight the real war.
That would free up some of their people operating in the background areas. But part of my understanding was Ukraine had troops in working those types of posts that were people that either had been rotated off the front or were, for various reasons, not really suitable, to have up on the front if you have other options. Right? Yeah, these are older folks or folks that may have been injured in combat. Because let's be honest, Poland's not going to invade Ukraine. So you really don't need to have your combat capable folks stationed there, if we're being honest. But no, I think this was a very good move by Macron. It surprised literally everybody. And if I had to bet on just one thing, I think it's for the purposes of starting to get some strategic ambiguity over what West's going to do, brewing in Putin's head. Um, and we've had a few notes in our back channels, and I'd seen this earlier as well, and now I'm seeing it being reported in a few other places. It looks like yeah, Slav, you might correct my pronunciation, but I'm told that they've been getting better. Feodosia is getting spicy right now. Looks like they've been getting some presence from the Ukrainian Air Force. Hopefully, let's see, what time is it there? It's about, 5 o'clock in the morning. So battle damage assessments, if any, hopefully in the next 6-12 hours, we get some images leaked out of Telegram if there was some good effect on target. But I just go back real quick to the Schultz and intercepted German conversation thing. I think what's more interesting to me about that is that Tauruses have actually been provided. That does appear to be confirmed by official sources now. Then the Germans have given Taurus. I wonder how many. And that's a good question to put into the back of the head of some Russian generals sitting down there in Crimea, because they all have to know that ain't none of them safe. And it was just it was the day before yesterday. There was another good-sized gathering of Russian troops that Captain HIMARS paid him a visit with some tungsten crunch berries that were enjoyed by all, and quite a few officers were they joined the cube that day, and I think total of 19 dead. That number is almost certain to climb, as Russian medical care is pretty medieval. So yeah, they're clearly not learning these lessons. I mean, it's not that they're not learning; it's just they don't learn quickly. So we haven't had a New Year's Eve 22-23 level event repeat. So yeah, but we've had a bunch of these 30, 40 people, high level rank. And I mean, they have to know that there's really nowhere in Ukraine where they're actually safe from human intelligence. And all it takes is one babushka sitting in her house to text that bot on Telegram, and their ass is as good as grass. And I think back over to you, Slavi. I believe you were trying to move on to the next item before and just keep getting derailed.
All good. Yeah, just to summarize kind of the action that's happening, and we're waiting for more information on it. We got action in Russia, in Ingushetia, which is on the border with Georgia. Seems like there is a lot of gunfire, um, and it looks pretty big. Um, I'm not sure whether it's who is fighting who, but I think Russia did send its kind of best special troops out there. So waiting for more information on that. And then we have action in, as you said, fellow Hubanks, in Fedosia, Crimea. Also waiting on more information from that, but nonetheless, very exciting. Um,
And I
the next,
just got some more information.
ooh, yes, please go ahead.
This is from a source that is very conservative and tends to triple check themselves. Looks like the oil terminals got hit. Firefighters and
This is in St. Petersburg, correct?
no, Fedosia.
Oh, okay.
Firefighters and ambulances have been observed speeding towards the oil terminals there. So, yeah, good hit. Look forward to the pictures in the morning. This is this is part of that death by 1,000 cuts going after their oil infrastructure. Any one of these by itself isn't a huge deal, but the frequency with which Ukraine is targeting these oil depots and these refineries by this summer. Who was it? Was it finance or somebody was in here about a week ago discussing just how much Russia's hydrocarbon export volumes are down, and now they've announced, effective as of yesterday, for, I think they said the next 6 months, but let's be realistic, that yesterday is probably the end of their refined petroleum exports. Their gasoline exports are now shut off. So keep doing it. And this is going to bankrupt these people. I very much hope to see the scenes I saw in the early 90s there. People with entire wheelbarrows full of rubles to buy bread that the store may or may not have. And when that happens, don't send them any aid. They need to realize this is their fault. And it's going to have to hurt a lot. So anyway, back over to you before I go too much further down that rabbit hole.
All right. The story that I wanted to do next, which is sort of good. North Korea suspends ammunition shipments to Russia by sea. Um, the supply of munition to the Russian Federation by sea, likely due to production issues in the DPRK or logistical problems. Um, so the vessels carrying weapons have not appeared in ports for over the past few weeks. This is fantastic. As we know, Russia has been using North Korean missiles and ammunition. So we have the NK Pro said 4 vessels, namely Angara, Mia 1, Maria, and Lady R, had transported ammunition to Russia, making at least 32 trips. The last time Maya 1 entered North Korea's Rason port was on February 12th, and the Lady R on February 4th. During this time, no containers were ordered as being delivered to the export pier. All these vessels are subject to sanctions by the U.S. Department of the Treasury for their alleged involvement in transporting military equipment and ammunition from North Korea to Russia. Satellite images from February 12th show no large cargo ships near the 2 docks in Raisin, where weapons are usually loaded. Perhaps the operation was suspended due to production issues in North Korea or other logistical difficulties. It is also possible that the weapons are being transferred to Russia by air or rail across the shared border. Um, I think this is good news. But hopefully the problem is in the uh with the production or logistical, and hopefully it's not getting delivered uh by railroad or by the road. But we have no confirmation on that. This is just by air. So what do you guys think of this?
Now, my understanding is to go from the Korean Peninsula, to go from North Korea to anywhere in Western Russia, is going to either involve a boat or a fairly long train ride. Ukrainian partisans have been, or not partisans, special operations forces and dissident groups, you can't see the air quotes that I'm making, in Russia have shown themselves to be quite adept at disrupting Russian rail traffic. So I would think that transporting these type of munitions by rail, um, number one, the United States is going to know. We have satellites that can basically read your license plate. Um, so we will know when and where these train cars are. And we already know there's air quotes, um, Russian resistance groups that have targeted that rail link. What do they call it? Is it the Trans-Siberian Railroad, or is a name for the railroad that crisscrosses Russia from east
Yeah,
to west?
was that the one from China, from and to China?
Well, this goes from the west coast or the east coast of Russia. It's the only really full coast it has, all the way over to the west. Um, and they've targeted it before. So, and if they were stupid enough to send train cars full of artillery shells, you bet your ass they're going to try and blow that train up. 100%. Like, that's a juicy target, and that's a sympathetic target too. If you can derail that thing and then detonate even one of the shells, you're gonna put one hell of a crater in the ground there. And I'm sure the Russians would get the rail lines back up, but it won't be quick. So I don't know. Maybe this is I'm thinking this is honestly a production limited thing. Um, but the fact is, none of us really have good capacity idea for what North Korea is actually able to put out. Given the fact they're basically always dealing with some degree of famine in the country, I'm kind of doubting that it's all that high, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I really don't. And that would be something for one of the finance guys and or gals that comes around here. If we had a owner around, this might be something in her wheelhouse if they have any idea. But the fact is, North Korea is just so secretive and so backwards. We don't have a great way to know, but the armory in Pennsylvania that's pounding out 155 shells stateside. I guarantee you, the North Korean capacity is nowhere near that. And I have quite a few clients that pull loads out of there. Those shells they're making are going somewhere in Europe.